When you hear the word Salat, what comes to mind? For millions, the answer is immediate. It's the beautiful, structured Islamic prayer. But what if the Quran itself, the primary source, paints a different picture? Today, we're going to do a deep dive, using only the Quran's own words to investigate what Salat truly means. I mean, for millions of people around the globe, this is it. This is Salat, a deeply meaningful and structured ritual, performed 5 times a day, facing a specific direction. It's a practice of incredible discipline, with very specific movements and words. And that's the common understanding, for sure. But what if we just hit pause for a second and ask a really fundamental question? If we were to set aside centuries of commentary and tradition and look only at the Quran, does the source text itself actually define Salat in this specific way? So let's dive in. Our approach here is pretty simple. For the next few minutes, think of us as linguistic detectives. Our only tool is the Quran itself. We're going to let the book define its own terms with no external commentaries. Let's just see what patterns emerge. Now, the traditional system is incredibly detailed, right? You have Salat, the main prayer, but you also have Wudu for ablution, specific movements like bowing, which is Rukoo, and prostration, Sujud, and of course the big Friday gathering, Jummah. It's a whole framework, so rich and complex that it literally fills volumes and volumes of scholarly texts. So here's the crucial question that drives this entire investigation. Are all those details, the 5 daily timings, the exact words you're supposed to say, the number of cycles you perform, are they laid out explicitly right there in the Quran? Well, that's what we're here to find out. So, where do we start? We're going to start by decoding the core concepts. We're going to trace the fingerprints of a few key Arabic words throughout the Quran. The idea is, if we see how the text uses these words in different contexts, we might uncover a much broader, more nuanced meaning. Let's start with the word sujud. Traditionally, this one seems pretty straightforward. It's understood as the physical act of prostration, placing your forehead on the ground in prayer. It's a very clear physical action. But then you look at how the Quran itself uses the word. In chapter 13, it says that everything in the heavens and the earth performs sujud to God. And then it adds this fascinating detail, as do their shadows. And that creates a bit of a puzzle, doesn't it? I mean, if sujud is only a physical act, how can a shadow do it? This verse kind of forces us to consider a broader meaning, maybe something like submission to a natural order. A shadow performs sujud simply by following the laws of light and physics. It just submits. Okay, so that's clue number 1. Now for the main event, the word Salat. Conventionally, we think of it as a prayer directed from humans up to God. That direction is really important to the common understanding. But then, check out this verse. It describes God sending salawat, which is just the plural of salat, down upon people. All of a sudden, the direction is totally reversed. Salat is now flowing from God to humans. This raises a huge question. What could Salat possibly mean if God also performs it? It can't be a ritual prayer in this context. The source we're looking at here suggests it must mean something different, something more like support, or a divine connection, or a turning of attention towards humanity. This leads us to what might be the pivotal clue. There's a passage in the Quran that seems to reframe this whole concept, and it might just unlock the entire mystery of what Salat really means, at least according to the text itself. And this is where the perspective really shifts, from thinking about Salat as a discrete action you perform to seeing it as a continuous state of being. Here's the verse. It describes people who are saved from anxiety and impatience as those who do Salat. And then it adds a crucial detail. They are upon their Salat da'imun. That last word, da'imun, well, it changes everything. So what does da'imun actually mean? It means continuous, constant, perpetual, uninterrupted. It's the opposite of something that's intermittent, something that starts and stops. And this presents a direct logical problem. How can a person be continuous in a ritual that is, by its very definition, performed only at specific, separate times? Okay, but I know what you're probably thinking. What about the verses that seem to establish specific prayer times? That's a fair question. So let's test this theory of continuous consciousness against those very verses. Let's look at a key verse often cited for prayer times. Traditionally, phrases like the decline of the sun are read as literal, astronomical markers for when to pray. But this alternative reading asks, What if they're metaphors for phases in life, like a personal decline or going through a period of darkness and difficulty? It's a completely different way of looking at it. And this leads to a really key finding in this analysis. The Quran itself never mentions the number 5 for prayers. The specific names for the daily prayers, like Zohar or Asr, they're not in there. The number of cycles or rakas, not there either. The exact movements, not detailed in the text. According to this investigation, all of those details come from sources outside the Quran. But what about the Friday gathering, the Yawm al-Jumu'ah? I mean, surely a command for a group prayer must refer to a ritual, right? Well, let's look closely at what that verse actually says.
When the call is made, you should hasten to dhikr Allah, the remembrance of Allah. Now notice, it doesn't say hasten to the Salat. The command is to go to the remembrance. This suggests that the gathering is for collective learning and reflection, not necessarily just a synchronized physical ritual.
So after going through this whole investigation, we're left with two very, very different portraits of what Salat is. Let's just put them side by side and compare them. On one side, you have Salat as a complex ritual. This model relies heavily on external sources for its details, and it tends to divide life into sacred prayer times and, well, everything else. On the other side, you have this idea of Salat as a state of consciousness. This model is much simpler, it's derived only from the Quran, and it integrates all of life into a continuous state of awareness and connection. And that brings us right back to the final, provocative question at the very heart of this investigation. When you set aside all the external traditions and you examine the text on its own terms, what does the Quran actually say? This analysis is just a starting point, of course, an invitation for every reader to engage with the text directly.